Well, good morning and welcome to the regular March meeting of the Community and Cultural Investment Subcommittee. This subcommittee focuses on our city's efforts of around sustainability and recycling our neighborhoods, parks, arts, libraries, education, and Head Start and homelessness. I would like to call this meeting to order. Today's date is March 6, 2023, and the time is 10:07 a.m. And before we get started, I know we have some special guests with us today that I would like to recognize. I would like to recognize 2022 ASU cohort of the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative, the YSEALI Civic Engagement Institute. So I just want to thank you guys so much for being with us today. Hope you guys don't think that this meeting is boring, but I think we're going to be covering some really cool topics today. We're going to talk about parks. Our director, Cynthia, is going to walk us through how we're going to make our parks a lot safer. And you guys will get to learn a lot. What is it that a lot of our constituents really care about? So thank you guys so much for joining us and being with us today. Thank you. And we will start today's meeting with a call up to the public. First, I would like to have a representative from the Law Department read a brief statement on the public comments section of this meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meeting Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented.
Thank you. And now we will turn to staff for any public comment.
We have 2 speakers. Our first speaker joining us virtually is Dr. Sylvia Herrera. Dr. Herrera, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, you may begin.
Okay. Thank you very much. Good morning, City Council members. I'm here today to provide a background on the necessity to retain the only affordable housing left in Phoenix, and those are the mobile home parks that are left. There's over 70,000 households in Maricopa County, according to a study that was done on the future of land and housing in America, in the U.S., as well as the American Community Survey that indicates that there's at least 19,000 units of mobile home park or mobile homes. With an average of three persons per household, that means that there are thousands of people that are being affected by the displacements. Most parks charge between $500 and $700. So again, this is the only affordable housing that there is right now. There's a housing crisis. We need prevention strategies like mobile home overlays for the existing mobile home parks. There's thousands of families at risk of displacement, including our elderly, our most vulnerable populations. These are facts. They're not talking about 3 mobile homes parks. We're talking about a lot of people that are going to be displaced, and they're transitioning out of their own homes that they own. In fact, the school districts as well are being affected. The school district around GCU is one of the most impacted school districts, losing over 2,000 students. In fact, they had to close a school because of this. The census tracts around GCU are on the top 3 census tracts that have amount of housing lost in the whole county. So we're looking at GCU displacing low-income communities around that area. So again, we're looking for prevention. I know that intervention at this point is necessary and it's good, but there's more mobile home parks that are in peril. Mobile home residents are in peril of losing their homes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our second speaker is Jerry Van Gass, joining us in person.
Thank you, council members. Jerry Van Gass. It's been a long time since I've been here. The names change for the committee as usual, but I'd like to make a few comments about the Phoenix Parks and Preserve Initiative Fund, or AKA 3PI. The residents twice now have voted in the past with 80% approval of this fund. It's basically a 40-year fund, taxing themselves 0.1% tax revenue, which recently it's amounting to like $40 million a year. There's currently over $110 million in this fund, and yet the voters never intended to confer this money, this tax money that they tax themselves, to the Parks Department to spend at their discretion. We've been expecting transparency and accountability, but we're not getting it. Our questions, our public records requests are either not answered. I mean, they're ignored basically. And that's just not acceptable. So what we're asking is that we'd like to see Parks Finance Group address this subcommittee and discuss the purpose, the parameters of the fund, how it's allocated to different projects, and then also answer questions from the public. And we haven't seen that. And Sarah Porter at the last 3PI, not the last, the annual 3PI Oversight Committee meeting expressed the same concern. She's a member of the Parks Board and of the 3PI Oversight Committee. And she said there's a lot of confusion out there and a lot of questions that have been unanswered. And she'd like them to be addressed in front of the Parks Board also. I mean, this is way too much money. That was our biggest worry day one when this was voted on, that, here's a pot of money. We had to go to court once to get $17 million back. And we don't want to go to court again. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you. And is that all for public comment? Thank you. And then also we would like to introduce our interpreter, if she can please introduce herself.
It's actually Oscar Monroy.
I am so sorry.
Would you like to introduce yourself for those in the audience or online that might need interpretation?
Buenos días, mi nombre es Oscar Monroy, soy el intérprete para esta mañana.
Thank you. And with that, we will move to approve the minutes of our February meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from February 1st, 2023?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 The motion passes. Now we will move to the consent items on our agenda, items 2 through 4. These items are Community Development Block Grant, American Disability Act Housing Rehabilitation, Subrecipient Award, Request Approval of Head Start Birth to 5/23/24 ERSCA Plan Updates, the Arizona Commission on the Arts Fiscal Year 23-24 Creative Capacity Grants Application. Is there a motion for consent items 2 through 4?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion passes. Next on the agenda, we have items 5 and 6 for information only. These items are the Head Start Birth to 5 monthly report for January 2023, the Phoenix Public Library's 125th anniversary. Would any of my colleagues like to hear more on these items? Okay, thank you. And now we will now move on to items 7 through 10, which are for information and discussion. We will start with item 7, which is the Public Works Apprenticeship Program updates. We will begin with a presentation from Deputy City Manager Mario Paniagua in the Public Works Department.
Good morning, Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee. You get Joe Giudice, Public Works Director, this morning instead of Mario. Sorry about that. We're excited to be here this morning to share some information about our Public Works Department apprenticeship programs, and we're joined by HR, who's going to give some general overview of apprenticeships as well. There we go. Thank you. So our Public Works Department has long invested in apprenticeship programs to have a workforce both skilled in their craft as well as steeped in a commitment to public service. And in partnership with our labor organizations and our Human Resources Department, we're excited to announce that we've expanded investment in the apprenticeship programs with some expansions in our electrician apprenticeship program this fiscal year, where we added 2 additional positions. Our electrician program we consider that's our legacy program. Also, our well-known solid waste equipment operator program was expanded this year. We have now up to 10 apprenticeship positions in that program. We also added a new program this fiscal year, our building equipment operator program. These are more commonly thought of as heating, ventilation, and air conditioning technicians. And then we're really pleased to announce today we'll be adding a new program, our Fleet Apprenticeship Program. So next I'm going to turn it over to Megan Avalos, a Deputy Human Resources Director. I forgot to announce her. Let me also introduce Chris Ewell, Assistant Public Works Director over our Facilities Division, and Felipe Moreno, Assistant Public Works Director over our Solid Waste Division. Will all be speaking to you today about these programs. And Megan's going to share with you some updates on what Human Resources is doing to help departments out across the city expand their programs. Megan?
Thank you, Chris. Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, thank you for your time today. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the HR perspective on apprenticeships and some of the work that our staff has been doing. So we do have one dedicated apprenticeship coordinator who works full-time to oversee the day-to-day operations as well as grow the programs across the city. So some of the work that she does is to find programs that have been successful and then move to expand those. So we do currently have over 50 individuals who are currently in apprenticeship programs or are currently being onboarded. And we've seen a lot of success with this because people are able to start with little to no experience and then grow a fruitful career with the city. We are also finding a lot of success with targeting underserved communities and expanding those opportunities with them. So Joe talked a little bit about the programs that they have within Public Works. We're also using the apprenticeship programs in other departments such as parks for the gardeners, street maintenance workers, in water for instrumentation and controls, and most exciting for us right now is expanding into this general apprentice classification for units 1, 2, 3, and 7. And right now we're working on rolling out a finance procurement officer apprentice. And honestly, these programs with this general classifications are lending themselves to a lot of flexibility. So we're hoping to have more and more programs that make sense with different departments. So what are the benefits? And what makes apprenticeships so appealing? Really, it's the on-the-job training that leads to certifications that really makes this such an awesome opportunity for individuals in the community. And then they get benefits, the full-time benefits that all city staff enjoy, And there's also opportunities with what's called the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And this WIOA funds are available to apprenticeship members who qualify. Currently, we have 11 individuals taking advantage of these funds, and it ranges from bus passes to other benefits. So I'm going to turn it back over to Chris to tell you more about what they're doing in Public Works and their developments.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, the electrician apprenticeship program is our oldest program in the city of Phoenix. It was developed in the 1950s. Currently, we have 4 electrician apprentices in the program. We've had as many as 20 to 25 in the program back in the 1970s. This is a 4-year program. It is registered with the state of Arizona, and during the day they get intensive on-the-job training, and in the evening they get classroom training through the Phoenix Electrical Joint Apprenticeship Training Center. It's a mouthful. A unique feature of this program is that electrician apprentices do rotate through 3 departments, whereas most of the programs, they stay in 1 department. In this case, they rotate through Public Works, Water Services, and Aviation. And then in the very near future, they will rotate through the Street Transportation Department in their traffic signal shop. The next program is the Building Equipment Operator Program. It is the first of its kind in the city of Phoenix. We currently have 2 apprentices in that program, and they're focused on intensive daytime training, just like with the electricians, and then they do have classroom training in the evenings through Arizona Pipe Trades. This program is especially important to us because we have very complex HVAC systems and controls throughout the city of all different types, and it's been harder and harder to find skilled individuals in those areas that are willing to come work for us. We're going to train them in-house. And then last summer was when we first hired on those 2 apprentices. They're doing great in the program so far. I'll turn it over to Felipe for the next section.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm very excited to talk about our Solid Waste Equipment Operator Apprenticeship Program. This was done in partnership with LaUNA Local 777, and we actually had our first class launch in March of 2017. It is the first of its kind in the country, so you're going to hear a lot of firsts from Public Works and apprenticeship. We did achieve state certification in 2020, so very proud of that, and we actually have 10 current apprentices. So we did expand our program in the last budget cycle where we added 7 of the apprentice positions. So in the past, we'd have to pull from existing vacancies and hold them. Now we have a dedicated source of candidates so we can keep the cupboards full and keep transitioning and expanding the program rather than impacting the operations. So that's very exciting. It's a 2,000-hour program, and this is something where they first get their commercial driver's license, which is a great benefit to people to earn their commercial driver's license in the city of Phoenix because it can be very expensive. And then from there, we train them in the safe and efficient practices of all things solid waste and operating heavy equipment. To give you an idea of the success of the program so far, since 2017, we've had 18 graduates through the program, and we're very proud to say that 15 are still with the city, so we have a really good retention rate. And I'd also like to point out that 9 are still within the solid waste department or utility, and then we have 5 promotions and 1 transfer. So this demonstrates retention, but also a path forward to develop a career with the city and not have to just be in one position your whole time. And that's very exciting as we promote our next recruitment in 2023. Next, I'd like to highlight a couple of our apprentices' experiences in the program with a quick video.
Hi, my name is Brooke. I am a SWEO apprentice or a solid waste equipment operator apprentice, and I've been with the program for about 6 months now. I've always wanted to do something with big trucks, so the ability to earn my CDL is kind of like my foot in the door with that, and I probably would have been in debt for quite a few years without the apprenticeship program. Today I'm out collecting recycling. Driving something like this is not something normal for women, for sure. I definitely get looks all the time of people who are just surprised that I'm driving a truck this big. But it's definitely helped me with confidence and being able to realize that I can accomplish dreams that I didn't think could happen, but now are a reality.
Hello, my name is Emerald Meza, and I am an electrical apprentice for the City of Phoenix. Today we'll be working at the City Council chambers. Being in the apprenticeship program gives me more opportunity to be able to proceed in the career, to be an inspector, or be my own boss. I love working for the City of Phoenix because they provide all the tools I need to get my job done, and they also take care of my well-being. Working as a woman in this field just helps me give more of a push to learning the trade. I want to show that we are hard workers and we can accomplish anything we want.
All right, so those are two of our apprentices. So thanks to Brooke and Emerald for having the courage to let us take those videos with them. And so also wanted to point out, if you saw Brooke's video, that was a very windy day a couple of weeks back. You'll notice that the cans were down, and Brooke, like many of her other drivers, were getting out of the truck and uprighting those cans. So well-trained apprentice is wonderful to see. So now I want to, there we go. I want to tell you about our first ever new program, our Fleet Apprenticeship Program. First, I'd like to thank Jason Henley, President of AFSCME Local 2384, as well as Deputy Public Works Director Mr. Keith Carbajal, our Fleet Services Deputy Director, for collaborating to get this program in place. When I was in Fleet Services a few years back, this is something that was a top priority for me, so I'm excited to see that we were finally able to get this delivered. The apprenticeship program has will have two positions, equipment service worker 2s. Much like the other program design, this is a 2-year program. They'll have daytime mentoring by journey level technicians, and then evening classroom training, safety training to accommodate and supplement their growth. The program's got approved in February. We're recruiting now. And also please say HR is already aggressively working on getting state certification here in the coming months. With that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
Councilwoman Ansari.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all so much for the presentation. I find it was great to see the woman Brooke as an apprentice in the solid waste position. I actually just watched the episode of Parks and Rec where Leslie Knope is proving that women can do that exact job just as good as, if not better than men. So it was very funny to see that here, and I love that we are, trying to hire women and prioritizing hiring women in these critical positions for the city. My question is around the electrician apprenticeships. Last year when we passed our electric vehicle roadmap, transportation electrification action plan, we had a piece in there around the importance of the EV ITP training program. Can you talk more about that and whether or not we are using that program and those standards and training our new apprentices in that program? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question, Chairwoman, Vice Mayor. We have, I think, about 6 electricians that have been through the EVITP certification. We have not yet gotten it to the level of an apprenticeship. We still have more of our own electricians that will need to get through that training certification program. But as the city continues to add electric vehicle charging stations and the associated infrastructure, our electricians will continue to grow their training and experience in that certification so that they're able to maintain those charging stations.
Sorry, is that 6 in the last year or so, or has that been going on longer?
Yeah, and I hope I have my number right on 6. I think that was the number I counted.
Madam Chair, Council Member Ansari, I believe it's actually 7. And yes, they just completed that training in the fall into early winter, and we're looking at having additional team members go through that training.
Okay. That's great to hear. I mean, as you know, and Joe, you have prioritized this heavily, and with the new fleet transition plan that we passed last fall to completely phase out all of our fossil fuel powered buses by 2040. I hope that we can continue to train folks in EVITP and make sure that we have the workforce necessary to power our city in a clean way. Thank you.
And just to follow up with that, I guess my question is, do we think that we have the resources that we need so that we can continue to train folks at that capacity as we continue to transition our fleet?
Yeah, Chairwoman, we're always constantly evaluating our resource needs. One thing certainly from a fleet and even a facilities perspective, whether it's electricians or fleet technicians, as the city is growing, we're adding new vehicles, fire trucks, et cetera, to the fleet. So we'll need to continue to evaluate our staffing resources to be able to match the demand, as well as we transition. So, from a fleet perspective, we do anticipate that for certain things, the transition to electric motors away from an internal combustion engine actually reduces some maintenance expenses associated with vehicles, but then you have the charging infrastructure. So we're constantly in flux there, but at current time, we're staffed appropriately for the equipment we have, as long as we can get our vacancies filled, and we've had a lot of great progress there, as you know, in the last few months.
Okay, and then I guess just a follow-up question. I just think that these programs definitely change people's lives. Right, so I just want to thank all of you for all of your hard work and working together with the labor unions and making this happen. Just hearing one of the workers, just talk about how safe she feels and how she feels that as a city, we give her the tools that she needs to be able to do her job. I love the fact that we are a real example on what real good jobs actually looks like. So I guess another question that I had, how many apprentices do we put through the program every year? Through the different programs that we have, whether it's SUO, whether it's, engineers, whatever it is?
Madam Chair, approximately, we currently have 50 people in programs right now, and we're seven individuals are being onboarded, but it varies based on the program and the length. The number of graduates, we can get back with you on the number that we had last year and in the previous years.
That would be great, just because I know that we are, always looking to hiring more people, and I think the more folks that we can bring into our programs, I think that's pretty amazing, and being able to get a career with the city, I think that's important for all the hard work that we need to continue to do for constituents. But I'm very happy, I'm very excited with all the progress that you guys have made and all the hard work that you guys are doing. I'm excited for everything that's happening as we continue to move forward. So thank you so much. Any other questions, comments? No, I think you guys did great. Thank you. And now we will move on to item 8, which is the Park Ranger and Security Services update. We will start off with Deputy City Manager Inger Erickson and the Parks and Recreation Department Director Cynthia Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Cynthia Aguilar and Deputy Director Jared Rogers are here for this presentation.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Today, at your request, we're here to provide you with an update on our efforts to fill park ranger vacancies, as well as an update on our pilot security services program. I will be turning it over to Jared to start with our park ranger update.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Glad to be here again to talk about our park ranger program. As Cynthia mentioned, I'll spend some time talking about our current park ranger program and where we're at with that. As a reminder, we have one park ranger classification, but our park rangers can be assigned to 2 different general work groups. They might serve time or work in the mountain preserves, then other times they might work in the urban parks. And one of the ways that they would move from one area to the other is at our annual shift bid. And that occurs based on seniority, when rangers have an opportunity to maybe change their work location. Start off also by focusing on what the mountain preserve rangers do. So as you can imagine, they focus heavily on the things that happen in our mountain preserves, helping protect animal habitat, working on hiking trails, maintenance of trails. They erode over time and need work. They also help keep up the general cleanliness of trailheads and restrooms. They also have a key component, as all of our park rangers do, in educating the public. They focus on the code of conduct, which is our rules of how people should be behaving in parks so that everybody can enjoy our beautiful preserves and parks. They also focus on safety, helping keep people safe as they hike with our Take a Hike, Do It Right programming and messaging. And they also offer programs, as you can see in the picture here. A ranger is leading young students on learning about our preserve system. Now I'll also focus on the park rangers assigned to urban parks. So we have 186 urban parks, which are our inner city parks, or spread throughout the city. We also have paths, bike paths and tunnels that our park rangers also help out in. Their primary responsibility is to educate the public again about the code of conduct, our park rules, and city ordinances. In general, both rangers serving in preserves and in our urban parks help with guest satisfaction. They help keep our parks safe, and they help to keep our parks attractive. We've made a big investment in our parks, and they're a great asset, and our rangers perform a vital role in keeping them that way. They also help with just general park usability to make sure that all of the amenities are kept up. Recruitment efforts. So, as you can imagine, we have 103 park ranger positions in total. We have a lot of movement in that position. A lot of people start their career at the city as a ranger and have opportunities to move up or go to other agencies after they've learned the skill and the job. We are constantly looking for ways to bring more rangers on and fill positions. We use job boards at job fairs and hiring events. And we have a regular recruitment process. As soon as we close one, we almost virtually open the next one. In February, during Black History Month, we had our first annual hike with a firefighter here from a park ranger event, where we had a lot of community from South Phoenix come and from other areas in the region to meet with park rangers and firefighters. And that was a great opportunity. I got to talk to a nurse who was interested in becoming a park ranger. She loved the setting. We're at beautiful South Mountain Park, and she saw that as a good opportunity for her. So we're looking for opportunities like that to further get the message out about what a great career choice a park ranger can be. As I mentioned before, on this chart, the bottom right-hand corner there gives our total number of positions as 103, and we currently have 17 vacant, and that's accurate as of this morning. We had 2 rangers start this morning. The rest of those vacancies, I'm happy to report that we are negotiating with each of them. We just finished a interview process, so knock on wood, as long as no rangers leave in the next couple of weeks, we're hoping to be completely staffed by the end of March. With that, I will turn it over to Cynthia. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. Moving into information about our Pilot Security Services Program, back on November 2nd of last year, the City Council approved implementation of a Pilot Security Services Program for 6 months in 12 park locations. Immediately after that, it took us a couple of months, so it did take us a little longer than we anticipated to enter into negotiations with our existing security services provider. Again, that was on the contract amendment part of this to identify the scope of work, charges, and just finalize that, which finally we were able to execute in January, that contract amendment. And at that point is when the security contractor was able to begin the recruitment process. Naturally, he did want to wait until we executed that amendment before he started onboarding individuals. So that happened in January when the amendment was completed. And then in February, preliminary patrols did begin as part of a training effort with the company, and the patrols continued to increase to full scope as staffing allows. So I'll get into a little bit more detail on what that means in this next slide here. So the original scope of work included patrols happening every day from 8 p.m. to 10 a.m. Because of the limited staffing currently, the security patrols are taking place from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m. And so instead of a 12-hour scope of work, right now we are at an 8-hour scope of work. But the patrols are happening at all 12 park locations. The security guards are educating park users about park rules. Also in their scope of work, they open, close, and inspect restrooms and park gates. They ensure the park is clear of users upon the park's closure. They are submitting daily reports, which our staff are going through every single day, and I've been scanning those as well. And they are relaying information as needed to our department. And I can share that as of today, since those services began in February, they have not had to call the police department for any type of assistance. As a reminder, the security patrol zones, well, actually, there were 12 parks, but as a reminder, these are the zones. They occur in 3 geographic areas. Zone 1 includes Cielito, El Oso, Cesar Chavez, and Maryvale parks. Zone 2 includes Pierce, Perry, Los Olivos Park, as well as Troya Trail. And then Zone 3 includes Cortez, Washington, Paradise Valley, and Sunny Slope Parks. And what these zones mean is that there are 2 security guards who drive to each of these park locations. So 2 guards are each assigned to 1 zone. Those 2 guards then patrol those 4 parks. They drive to each park location, they get off on foot, and they walk the perimeter of the parks. Again, the areas of the park they walk or pay special attention to were all areas that we worked on with them in those negotiations as part of their final scopes of work. Preliminary observations, again, are just that they are happening in all 12 parks. We are reviewing those reports. I can tell you things that they are commonly seeing are people in the park after hours, so they're educating them about park rules, what time they need to be out of the park. People in the park are doing a variety of different things from what we're seeing in the reports. Some might be using the park as intended. Some might be using the park not as intended. And what I mean by that is there might be people skateboarding on tennis courts, which is not allowed, or they have found people playing soccer inside tennis courts, which can also cause damage. So when we say not using a park amenity as intended, those are examples that we could point out. They're finding a lot of vehicles parked in parks, several vehicles at a time in some parks, where individuals are in the park and they may approach and remind them that the park is closed, and those individuals will leave the park. They are also finding individuals with small fires under ramadas. That's been a common one this past week that they've been able to address. And they're able to report back vandalism to us. And so the most common form of vandalism has been things like graffiti in the park or broken glass in the park, is what we've seen so far. But I can say that from what we are seeing, and when we talk to the security vendor, people are leaving without incident. So when a guard is approaching them and educating them about the park rules, they are leaving. At times, they may pull up in the vehicle or get out on foot and see them coming, and they may leave just when they see them coming. As far as next steps, again, the pilot was approved to be a 6-month program, so this will take us through July. We'll continue to track data on the security services. When we went to council back in November, we also said that when we get about halfway through the program or so, we would engage with the key neighborhood groups around those parks to give them an update on the security services. And then we would look to return to this group in June, since July falls right in the middle of summer break, to give another update in June. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, comments? Councilwoman Ansari? Vice Mayor, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chairwoman. So I appreciate the presentation. I think I still stand by what I said a few months ago, that my preference, strong preference, would be that park security concerns are addressed by park staff, not contracted security. So I'm wondering how many new park ranger positions, other than those vacant, you think would be needed to cover the work that's being done by this pilot program, and what intentional efforts have we made since this discussion to ensure that we keep this program to just a pilot?
Sure, Vice Mayor Ansari, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Since we last met, one of the things that we've done is we've put together, and Jared especially has worked on this, to put together what he believes would be needed for a third shift of rangers to do that at your request. And so we have submitted information to be included as part of the city manager's trial budget, as part of the supplemental budget process for us. And what we've included is the addition of 14 park rangers and 1 park manager. And with those staffing levels, we would be able to conduct a third shift of park ranger patrols.
14 rangers, and I apologize.
1 park manager, which would be the supervisor of the group.
So, and can you remind me what the current, with the shifts that we do have, what are the current vacancies?
Yeah, Vice Mayor, I'm sorry. The current vacancies we have on the urban team are in the daytime shifts in the first half of the week and the evening in the first half of the week. I think we have 7 right now. And again, the intent is by the end of this month to have all of those filled.
Okay. So by end of March, we will have hopefully the 7 current vacancies filled. And then your hope would be that in that trial budget, we come forward. If that is approved, then we can focus on the third shift, and that would eliminate the need for the park security that's contracted out.
Vice Mayor, Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, members of the subcommittee, we would come back with an update, I believe, to the subcommittee and to the council to have that discussion about security services. But we are solely talking about the third shift of rangers, and then the security discussion is something the council would have to give us direction on.
And are you prepared to, if approved for the additional budget needed for the new positions, would you be prepared to hire those very quickly so then there's no gap between a potential, end of a pilot security program and start of a third shift?
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Ansari, members of the subcommittee, there would be a gap because the funding in this budget cycle would become available July 1st. And so actually the way this is written, we would start with hiring the supervisors that are needed for this program, followed by the park rangers. So we anticipate the soonest that we'd be able to fill all of those positions, if everything went well, would be by the end of September.
So is that recommendation that you've given to the city manager something that you could, come back to the subcommittee and recommend sooner so that we could move on it quicker than during the budget process?
Madam Chair and Vice Mayor Ansari, I think because the budget process is where the money comes, I think the thing that we probably would be able to do is maybe extend the contract until the Rangers were put on. So that might be the way to address that gap, if you will. You couldn't do it with staffing because the budget hadn't been approved.
Okay. The other question I had was around, and you touched on this a little bit, but how many calls has security had to make to park rangers or to the police department?
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Ansari, and members of the subcommittee, there have been no calls to the police department by security.
And the program has been, so in the few months that it's been up and running, there's been no serious situation where they've needed to go above and beyond their normal purview.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Ansari, members of the subcommittee, the program, the initial preliminary limited scope services started February 8th. So between February 8th and today, or as of yesterday, I should say, there have been no need for the security guards to contact the police department. People have been listening and leaving without incident.
Okay, and then my last question is around behavioral health units. We've been piloting having the behavioral health units come out once a week to 51st Avenue and Baseline and Levine, and we have, I've heard from residents that we've seen a marked improvement with, the state there, and people have been accepting services. So is that something simultaneously that maybe we have been looking at or we could look at for our parks as well?
Sure, Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Ansari, members of the subcommittee. That is something we can certainly look at. We've remained in close contact with Scott Hall in his office, and one of the things that we've talked to the security company about specifically during those overnight hours is to look for any trends. So if they're seeing consistent, a group of people who may be there every night or on a certain night who appear to need services, then we would relay that information. They would relay that to us, then we would relay that to Scott's team to do some targeted outreach at those locations during those windows of time.
Okay.
So I think that's something we could incorporate in that strategy as well.
That's great to hear. Well, I just want to say that I appreciate the fact that you have been working on the park ranger piece and that you feel optimistic that we'll be able to fill those 7 vacancies. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, I still feel very strongly that I would like to really ramp up our park ranger program, add that 3rd shift, and really invest there. And although it's only 3.5 weeks of data, I think it's also promising to note that there hasn't been, a violent crime incident where, this contracted security has even needed to call the police department. So I think that even more so goes to show that what we need is just more investment in the education that the park rangers do, just the monitoring, and as we know, they have more authority to begin with. So thank you for making that a priority. Anything we can do to expedite and move quicker on adding the 3rd shift so we don't have to wait till September of this year would be my preference as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I guess I would just also like to echo a lot of what the Vice Mayor has also said. I would not be very happy if we had to extend the contract with the security company. Just because as it is, and I know there's always going to be some incidents, but it sounds like those are just incidents that could probably be dealt with the next morning when we have our park rangers that come in the morning could probably deal with. So I guess my other question is, and I don't know if this is for Inger or if this question is for Lori. Sorry, Lori, for putting you on the spot a little bit, but I know that it takes a little while for us to hire people. And if we know that, we're going to put this in the trial budget, why wouldn't we start trying to hire for some of these positions, or at least buffer up a little bit more the positions that we do have? Instead of hiring 7, could we hire 10? Just with the potential that we would be moving those folks over, just because I wouldn't like to see us extending the security program, given that, sure, is it nice to have eyes out there, but it doesn't seem that there's been a huge need for the security company out there. Would that be a possibility for us to hire a little bit more with the intention that their shift would probably just not stay the same, or people that at some point would love to move to a graveyard shift? Is there a possibility to doing that?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, we can work with HR to see if there's a way to do that. We would need to know for sure that the money was going to be available before we'd want to hire people, right? So I think we can work with HR and the city manager's office to make sure that whatever that time, budget, and research, also the timing of it, if there's a way to do it, we'll figure that way out.
Yeah, I know our city manager, we've had many conversations about this, and I can see us being able to put this in the budget. So I would strongly recommend that we try to do that, because I would not like for you guys to come back and say, oh, we got to extend this program, this security program, for a few more months. I would really hoping that we could come back with something sometime in May or June. Right, I know that we vote our last budget vote, I think it's in July. Is it July or the end of June?
The end of June, I believe, or early July.
So the 3rd of July. So maybe coming back in May with some sort of potential and hoping, to be able, because I know that the hiring is the hardest piece. So if we can try to buffer that a little bit, I think that would be great.
Madam Chair, we will do the best we can to work with all the groups to make sure that happens.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, so thank you so much. Thank you. And with that, we are going to move to item 9, the annual review of the Neighborhood Services Department's code enforcement policy. We will start off with Deputy City Manager Gina Montes in the Neighborhood Services Department.
Good morning, Chairwoman and members of the subcommittee. We're happy to be here with you this morning to discuss our annual review of the code enforcement policy and Neighborhood Services Department. We'll start with Spencer Salfin. You want this?
Thank you, Gina. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I know, Madam Chair, when you introduced our special guests in the chambers this morning and you mentioned we have exciting items on the agenda, I know this was really the one you were thinking of. because this is, what could be more exciting than talking about a policy about codes and how we enforce them. If you recall, last year we made surface level changes to this code, primarily focused on updating contact information and minor language clarification. This year, we were going to go a little bit deeper and address some more significant items by discussing gaps that the City Council, staff, and the community have identified over the past year. After our discussion today, we will seek community feedback before bringing the final recommendations back to the subcommittee later this year. I will now turn the presentation over to Ana Maria Ortega, our newest Deputy Director, who oversees our Neighborhood Preservation Division, to discuss the existing policy.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. The code enforcement policy was adopted by City Council and grants NSD the authority to enforce the Neighborhood Preservation Ordinance and the portions of the zoning, animal, and business ordinances. There are 6 sections within our code enforcement policy. Section 1 outlines the purpose of the policy and establishes the standard code enforcement process. Section 2 provides the definition of recidivist and the notification policy regarding recidivist violations. Section 3 outlines the inspection process and identifies exceptions to the standard code enforcement process. Section 4 allows NSD to provide resources to assist residents experiencing hardships. Section 5 describes how NSD partners with other city departments to resolve complex cases. And lastly, Section 6 states the code enforcement policy will be reviewed annually by the City Council.
All right, thank you, Ana Maria. In the next few slides, we'll provide some specific items already identified as possible changes. The first 2 are more about clarifying and cleaning up language, and the last 2 are a little more substantial. The first change would align the policy with our current practice by simplifying our pre-notification letter. For those watching who may not know what our pre-notification letter is, when we have a new complaint on a property that has not had a recent case, we start the process by sending them this pre-notification letter that lets them know we received a complaint and that we will come out within 10 business days to inspect for a violation. This gives the owner a heads up and an opportunity to address a violation before we even get there. Recidivism is when we have had 2 or more recent cases with verified violations, in other words, a repeat offender. The current policy requires language to be included in the pre-notification letter about recidivism, which would be confusing for residents, as not only are they not recidivists by definition, but at that point we have not even established whether a violation exists. The more appropriate place for that language would be the notice of ordinance violation, which is sent after a violation has been confirmed on a property. Now, as mentioned on the previous slide, recidivism is when we've had 2 or more recent cases with verified violations. Currently, recent is defined as within a 24-month period or about 2 years. In a recidivist case, we skip the pre-notification letter and go straight to a notice of ordinance violation or a citation. As many of us know, right now the weather is getting warm and we've had an atypically rainy season. And so it's not unusual for weeds to pop up. We're seeing it all over the city. If someone has had a case, let's say 20 months ago, but has generally been maintaining their property, skipping straight to a notice of violation or a citation is really heavy-handed. For this reason, we're proposing to revise the period from 24 months to 12 months, which would also align with the time period for our strategic enforcement cases. Next, in Section 3, regarding inspections and enforcement, we're proposing additional language for exceptions. And this is kind of a long slide, and I apologize for that, but I have quite a bit to cover. So first, we would like some clarifications to allow us to deviate from our standard enforcement process to proceed to an immediate citation in situations where egregious or episodic violations exist. An egregious violation is when the condition or state of the property is in an extreme state of violation, which could present a health and safety issue, or is beyond the reasonable scenario where the owner may not be aware that there is a violation. An example could be a hoarder house where a recent fire has taken place and still presents a risk, or when an owner has multiple properties where we have had cases and we receive a complaint on another one of their properties for the same violation. An episodic violation is one that occurs intermittently. One example is when a commercial property is being used for illegal events, or we've seen this quite a bit over the last few years where there are raves occurring just intermittently throughout the year. In these situations, we receive complaints late at night and on different days. By the time we can identify the pattern of when the events are occurring, it may be quite a few weeks after the initial complaint has been received. An exception would allow NSD the authority to issue an immediate civil citation to address the neighborhood concerns in an expedited manner. Second, we would like to add language to address violations in private communities where the city is being used to address issues that are the responsibilities of the owner or management company. This language would still allow us to address health and safety issues, particularly for tenants, and blight impacting the surrounding community, but it would take us out of the internal disputes between landlords and tenants that they are really best equipped to address. And then our final recommendation is to seek to address an issue brought forward by the Vice Mayor last year when we were discussing our code enforcement policy. So we have scenarios where well-intentioned residents may be assisting people experiencing homelessness by allowing them to camp on their properties, which may result in code violations. We're recommending language changes that would allow us to deviate from our standard enforcement process and ensure we are leading with services and education, including offering any available city resources to support compliance in partnership with our Office of Homeless Solutions. And our next action, our next steps, our next action would be to go to the community to gather input on these items and identify any other changes prior to returning to the subcommittee with final recommendations this summer. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councilwoman, Vice Mayor Ansari.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you so much, Spencer, and to the team for this. I'm extremely encouraged that we're addressing two very important issues in this update, especially in the last 2 years, and those are harassment of mobile home tenants and also better communication around unsheltered resources during code complaints. You mentioned the issues that were brought forward, so just for public awareness, last year a constituent of mine named Liza was housing 2 unsheltered residents, Jose and Irma, on her porch, and she was providing shade for them with tarps that she hung up to make makeshift walls. They were a couple that was actively looking for work, and they were worried that they would get separated if they were to go to a shelter. Unfortunately, a code complaint was filed against Liza because of the tarps, and she was served a notice that she had to take down the tarps and that the individuals could not be living on her porch. Luckily, my office was able to work with Scott Hall and find Jose and Irma temporary housing in a hotel. And my team just touched base with Liza on Friday, and I'm happy to report that Jose and Irma have now their own apartment, and they are both employed. I'm glad that this code update will ensure that our neighborhood services employees lead with services in this situation rather than reporting directly to enforcement, so that more stories will end like Jose and Irma's story. So thank you very much. I'm really pleased with this update. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I think, Spencer, one of the things that's important, and I think you're addressing it here with what was stated by the Vice Mayor, is being able to apply either common sense or equity or just figuring out what it is, that we're doing as a department. So I would like to see a conversation around intentions or principles of that sort, and also a relationship to some of our newly created departments, like the equity department, potentially the public health folks that are joining us. Because, two situations I've seen in the last year. We had an elderly woman in her 80s who lost her husband in the pandemic, who started getting enforcement letters that her home was at risk to getting taken away. Neighbors had to step in once they found out what the situation was, because the woman was so freaked out that she might lose her home, that they helped her resolve the situation. That's obviously a situation where we would want to lead with services, or we want to be able to see what support we can give this person. Another situation in our district is a business that's been operating under zoning for the last 20 years. That's not the zoning it should have. So it's operating under A1, which means they have toxins, which means they're hurting the environment, and they have residents right next door to them that have been being hurt. And yet, for a situation like this, we take a softer approach, whether it's a business or whatever. And so I think I know it's hard, and it's probably up to leadership in your department or to figure those things out. But it's kind of, how do we make sense of some of these decisions when we're harsh on some residents, like the vice mayor's example, or the example I gave, and we're softer on situations where people are literally being hurt, like entire communities around them, where this business is hurting folks parking trucks all around, and obviously with the environmental concerns. And so I know it's hard to put that on paper, but just kind of wanted to see two questions. How do you see that working out, or how can we better address these issues? And then two, how do you see the department being able to work with the creation of the new departments, such as the equity department and the public health department?
Madam Chair, Council Member, those are both incredibly wonderful questions because I think they do speak to the culture that we're trying to create through our code enforcement process. I tell people all the time when we get calls from folks and they're confused, they may not understand a very kind of legal, formal process of code enforcement. And I try to really break it down to what our real intent is. And that's something that's not codified currently in our code enforcement policy, but probably should be. So I think that's really insightful, because what we're trying to do is create partnership. That to me, code enforcement is a tool to help us bridge that divide and say, hey, look, something's going on here that is impacting the neighborhood, and all we want is to work on that resolution together. So you mentioned an elderly woman who maybe have a hardship and a difficulty in coming into compliance for whatever her code violation may be. We have a number of programs that we can offer to assist. They don't always work because of a variety of different reasons, but we should be leading with those services, even in cases where we're not talking about necessarily homelessness. That doesn't mean that we don't have services that we can provide. So I do think that having some statements of intent or purpose to help make sure that all of our inspectors out there in the field understand why we do code enforcement. It's not just, a hammer and everything looks like a nail. That's not the intent. It is a tool to really help start conversations and create partnership. So I think that's a great idea. And on that same token of partnership, you mentioned a couple of our new departments who we work with quite a bit. We've had a number of conversations about how to incorporate what they do and what they will be doing into what we do to help inform us to make better decisions about our codes, our policies, but also how we can work together in partnership on specific cases where they're warranted. Certainly, we meet all the time with our Office of Homeless Solutions, and it's wonderful that we're under the same Deputy Director, Gina Montez, and where we'll work together even more, in the coming months. So I think there's connectivity all over the place and a lot of more opportunities to make sure we're providing our services in the best way possible for all of our residents.
Well, thank you for answering that. And I think in the community outreach, it would be important to maybe start that dialogue with community about the intentions piece or purpose statement, whatever that, there's other people that can come up with that. But whatever that looks like, I think it'd be important to also include in the outreach. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for that presentation. Thank you for being with us today. And now we will move to item 10, the One Arizona opioid settlement update. We will start off with Assistant City Manager Lori Bates in the Office of Public Health.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm happy to be here today to introduce this item. First, I would like to introduce you to Nicole Witt, our public health advisor, and I think this is the first time I've had a chance to introduce her publicly. She has been with us since October of last year, and as you're well aware, she is the first public health advisor for the city of Phoenix. So we're very excited to have her. She has a great deal of expertise, and I think she's going to bring a lot of value to the city in her new role. Nicole has a small team in the Office of Public Health, which she will introduce to you shortly. And the Public Health Advisor has a role that is really to advise the council and city management on a variety of public health matters. Everything from infectious diseases like COVID to environmental health challenges to social determinants of health, including mental health and behavioral health issues. Today we are going to discuss one of the significant focus areas of the Office of Public Health, which is the planning process around the opioid settlement dollars that the city, county, and state of Arizona are receiving, and how we will collectively determine how those dollars may be best used. So with that, I will turn it over to Nicole.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. I'm Nicole Witt, and I'm really pleased to be here today as in a great introduction from Assistant City Manager Lori Bays. So today we're going to talk about the One Arizona Opioid Settlement. As Lori noted, our office started at the end of October, and so this is one of the first items that we have prioritized for our office and will be working on. We do have a small public health team, myself as a public health advisor. We also have Yanit Sosoto, who's our special projects administrator, both of us with public health background and experience, and Emma Rutin, our public health fellow from the Maricopa County Public Health Unit, and that is collectively our public health office and our public health team. So the One Arizona Opioid Settlement, the city of Phoenix is one out of 90 cities and towns across all 15 counties in Arizona that signed on to the One Arizona Memorandum of Agreement, or a Memorandum of Understanding, or One Arizona Agreement. It's estimated the state will receive $542 million from 5 different settlements, and 44% of that funding will stay with the state to be used for opioid response activities. And 56% of the total $542 million will be dispersed to local governments. In Maricopa, Phoenix will receive 21.28% of the Maricopa's share of the funding. So far, we have 2 settlements that are active currently, and the city has received dollars just starting this year from the distributor settlement in the amount of just a little over $2 million, and the Janssen settlement in a little over $1 million. And this funding will be received annually over 18 years. So some of the settlements go over a course of 7 years, and then the distributor settlement, which is the longest, will receive funding every year for 18 years. So we really are at the very beginning. The other settlements, so CVS, Walmart, and the bankruptcy, we haven't received information on exactly the amounts of those settlements yet. So some of the, grounding for the One Arizona strategy, 70% of the funds have to be used for future opioid response activities. So similar, in the past there was tobacco settlements. They've learned from that experience, and there's a stipulation that it all must go to future activities. In the document, funds have to be used for what's called abatement strategies, and abatement strategies really must be evidence-based and nationally recognized opioid abatement strategies, including treatment, recovery, strategies in prevention, harm reduction, and of course supporting people involved with the criminal justice system, which might be things like diversion programs. You can also use a portion of the funding for training, coordination, planning, and research, which is really where we are right now. So in June 15th, that's Emma there, who I mentioned earlier on the slide. So June 15, 2022, Council approved an intergovernmental agreement with Maricopa County Department of Public Health for the Public Health Fellowship Program. Phoenix, Scottsdale, Glendale, Tempe, Mesa, and Correctional Services all have public health fellows assigned to them, and ours joined in September. And the goal of this program really is to work collaboratively with the city to coordinate between various cities that have opioid settlement dollars and are working on planning, to collaborate with the Maricopa County Public Health Department, and then, of course, to support our Phoenix-specific planning and to ensure that we use the funds that best address issues here in Phoenix. So for everyone, just a little bit about the opioid crisis. We didn't get here today quickly. This has been building for many, many years. It's considered there's 3 waves of the opioid crisis. So 1999 is wave 1, and that was really the prescription opioid crisis, which is where the settlement funding come from. They come from distributors and makers of opioids and prescriptions who, created harms for the public. In 2010, we reached wave 2, which is a heroin, so overdoses and death related to heroin specifically, and it's thought that, that is a result of the reduction in the availability of prescription opioids. And where we are now, which is in wave 3, so starting in 2013 to now, which is related to synthetic opioids. And so significant increases in overdose deaths involving this synthetic opioid wave, particularly, of course, those involving illicitly manufactured fentanyl. My little button just stopped working, so let me... Can you go to the next slide, please? Great, thank you. So just a little information for Phoenix. So this is provisional data that was provided by the Maricopa County Department of Public Health. So in 2022, there were 991 overdose deaths in Phoenix. Phoenix accounted for a little over half of all overdose deaths in Maricopa County. 78% of those were among males. 86% of those overdose deaths were between individuals between the ages of 25 and 65. And 28.8% were among people experiencing homelessness. And 71.5%, similar to what I mentioned before, involved fentanyl, but also 61.9% of the deaths involved methamphetamine. And it's important to note that we talk about opioid and response to opioid, but really we need to have a response related to substance use. We know that people use multiple substances, and it's not just contained to opioids. So part of our strategy certainly would be looking at broadly at substance use disorder. And to the right of the slide, just provided a breakdown of those overdose deaths by district. So certainly you can see across Phoenix, this is an issue that every district in Phoenix and every area is experiencing. It is impacting the whole city, certainly some more than others, but it's definitely felt everywhere. So for non-fatal overdoses, we don't have 2022 data yet. We have 2021. This is hospital discharge data. So in 2021, and I expect 2022 would be about the same, there were 4,903 non-fatal overdoses. So these are overdoses where individuals survived. 35.2% of those, so we were the 35% of the total in Maricopa County. And we look at the distribution between males and females, it's close to 50-50. I added information in there for our fire response. So in 2022, our fire responded to 3,869 non-fatal overdoses. So this is where the fire responded and administered naloxone, which is a medication to reverse opioid overdose. And just important to note that not everybody accepts services beyond that and is transported to the hospital. So only 60% of those were transported on to the hospital. And similar to my previous slide to the right, you'll see the breakdown of non-fatal overdoses by council district. And again, every council district is experiencing a significant impact of substance use. So where we are now. So we mentioned planning. We're at the beginning of 18 years of investment into our county, our city, and across the state. Really, in order to meet the needs of Phoenix and to set the stage for the next few years, we really want to start at the planning cycle, which is the first phase of assessment. This involves gathering data and information on the current needs of our community, each of the areas identified in the One Arizona Agreement. So as mentioned, there are abatement strategies, and it's important that we know what our needs are and what is our current scenario as it relates to those abatement strategies. So the Maricopa County Department of Public Health, we are in partnership with them. They will be completing 2 assessments. So they have contracted LaCroix and Milligan to do both of those assessments. One is a community-wide needs assessment that will focus on service providers. So this will be questions and an assessment of what services are currently available, where are their gaps, and from the service provider's perspective, what are the priorities as it relates to opioid and substance use response. They will also be doing assessment with people who use drugs. So obviously it's really important to talk to people who are using substances currently. They will focus on also people experiencing homelessness who use substances to understand what their barriers are to accessing services and treatment. And both of those assessments, they anticipate the results of that will be available in June of 2023. They will also be including an inventory of where dollars are currently going as it relates to these 4 areas of prevention, treatment, recovery, harm reduction, and justice, and provide a landscape of current services. So what does that mean for the City of Phoenix? So again, we are working closely with Maricopa County. We'll wait certainly for their results, but we know that the results of that survey and the assessment will require planning and involvement across all city departments. So we convened in November an internal advisory committee. It has membership from more than 13 departments, and we're actually adding more all the time. And some of them are listed in front of you. So of course, police, fire, our Office of Homeless Solutions, our neighborhood services, our city prosecutor's office, pretty much every department that may have a role to play in substance use and opioid response. And with our internal advisory committee and with the help of our fellow and in collaboration with the Maricopa County Public Health Department and their activities, we've identified 5 key activities for the City of Phoenix to begin with initially. So 1 is a departmental scan. This includes a survey of all city staff, so understanding their awareness, their knowledge, and their resource needs as it relates to substance use disorder and opioid use disorder, as well as a scan of current departmental practices, policies, and programs related to substance use disorder and opioid use disorder. For the program perspective, certainly looking for opportunities to enhance programs or implement new programs. Training and professional development on opioid use disorder and substance use disorder. So we would hope to take the results of the survey for staff to develop training and professional development opportunities that specifically address working with people who use substances, including referrals, et cetera. This is actually identified as one strategy in the One Arizona abatement document around providing ongoing education and training for government staff to work with people who use substances. Expand naloxone access. So as I mentioned, naloxone is one key strategy for reversing an overdose, so certainly can save lives. Right now in the City of Phoenix, the only 2 departments that have access to naloxone is our fire and police, and they do administer. So we will be exploring the opportunity to expand access to naloxone and get it into the hands of people who need it most, which is those who use substances, their friends, and their family. Resident survey and community forums. So I mentioned that Maricopa County will be doing an assessment with people who use substances and also an assessment with service providers. What they won't be doing is any kind of survey with residents of Phoenix or other cities. So we know it's really important to hear, as you saw on the slide, every neighborhood is impacted, everyone across the city is impacted by substance use disorder and opioid crisis. So it's really important that we implement a survey that asks the community, what are their concerns, what are their priorities, and we can combine that with the information that the Maricopa County Department of Public Health will have to get a really fulsome view around where we need to go. And community forums, we hope to be able to provide community forums, which will be an in-person opportunity to engage with the community, share information, and also hear from the community about where they think our priorities should be. And lastly, surveillance and a data dashboard. So I provided a little bit of data today, but we know it's really important as we move forward that we're able to monitor the situation in Phoenix, identify where areas of priority are, and that information can inform certainly future planning as well as evaluation. So we hope to be able to build a robust surveillance system and a data dashboard that will facilitate sharing of information, but also future programming and planning. And so our next step, really I've just highlighted what's happening from January to June. It's a lot. We specifically hope to launch the resident survey and community forums between this time, again, to align with the Maricopa County assessment, complete our internal assessment, so that departmental scan, and then develop a plan for naloxone expansion, which we hope to be able to bring back for information in the future, and then begin the development on the surveillance dashboard. And certainly beyond June, we'll be able to bring an update on what the next phases of this work will be. And that is all I have to share today. Thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate being here and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. We will go with Councilmember Garcia.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Nicole. Lori got to introduce you publicly. I just want to say how excited I am that you're on our team publicly. Um, I, I think this I've shared publicly before, but obviously have family and friends who've been in this situation. So it's something that hits home. And I think seeing the numbers of each of one of our districts also makes it hit home. And I'm really excited that you're on board and that you're able to, um, you know, have a plan for these funds that are coming. You mentioned an internal committee. Would there be an external community slash service provider or some sort of advisory committee that will also be created from those folks?
Through you, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, thank you for the question. Yes, I mentioned we have an internal committee. We do hope to create an external advisory committee as well, and with a broad stakeholders within the community that will, once we get some of that information back from the assessment, they can help with the next phases of identifying which priorities and bringing forward that plan. So absolutely there would be an external advisory committee. We're just not at that stage quite yet.
Thank you. You mentioned fire and police are the ones that have access to Narcan now. I'm assuming our CAP program, which is inside of fire, also has it. But I think I'm sure you know this, but I'm pointing out, I think a lot of our partners, whether it be, some of our shelter providers or CBI or other folks, you mentioned the number of folks that overdose while being unsheltered. I think it's important that we do that as well. I really do appreciate the fact, that this money's coming to the county, to the state, to other cities at the same time. So I'm really excited about the ability to collaborate or leverage funds, especially with the state remaining with such a large amount that we're able to kind of work on things together. And in that situation, I think, this we might have been a little too early for this bond program, but the city's plan is to have bond programs every 5 years. I think this situation, this crisis, has gotten to a point where we need to invest serious. And with this settlement being that for the next 18 years, funds will be coming that can sustain some of that programming. I really hope we can start. I know it's early. We haven't even passed, next year's bond, but for the next bond, to actually, ask community, because, everywhere we go, at least everywhere in my district, this is a question that's being asked to us. And to see, especially with facilities or infrastructure that needs to be set in place to be able to support, that we start having this conversation. So I hope, my colleagues, Lori, we all kind of start thinking through what that like real investment or what those amounts would look like in the future. And then the last comment I want to make is about both learning from other places and the past, previous epidemics, whether it was the crack epidemic or other situations that we've had in history similar to this. I think we can learn both good and bad, and what not to do. And so I hope we can learn from that, especially on exacerbating enforcement or thinking that we're going to be able to arrest our way out of a situation like this. I think it's something that both has been proven by history and also by other places. So I hope we can continue to develop all the infrastructure for resources and make sure that we handle these issues at root causes. And then I think I would venture to say that other cities, not only in the US, but in the world, are ahead of us in this and have taken different steps. And I think for a place like Arizona, some of those steps might be scary. And some of the solutions that have been brought up in other places that have been proven. And so I appreciate the data, but I'd also appreciate us being able to have that community conversation, handing paraphernalia out in the parks of people might sound very scary, but it's actually something that could be safe and actually could save people's lives. Or whatever the other, having safe sites, all those sorts of things might sound really scary, both to our constituents, the people of Phoenix, and some of us. And so I would also really appreciate in the future kind of a conversation of what are those things that are working in other places and have worked, And so we don't kind of jump into a situation where there's a suggestion and we haven't had that conversation about. I don't know if that's making sense, Nicole. I've said a lot, but would like to get your thoughts on that, on things that are happening in other places, or things that we may have to, explore as we move forward with these funds.
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair, to you, Councillor Garcia. I mentioned very briefly, and I know went quickly and covered a lot of information, but those strategies that are implemented, whatever we decide to do or you decide to do as a city, it does need to be evidence-based. So data is important, certainly, because it provides us with the information around where we should focus our efforts. But those strategies do need to be evidence-based, and evidence-based means learning from, you are correct, we are at the beginning, and there are other areas that are much further ahead in this journey. I guess the positive side of that is we can learn from their experiences, and that is exactly what we hope to do. So learn from innovative practices across the U.S. and other countries in the world, and bring that evidence base to whatever it is that we're recommending. And then as well, beyond evidence base, also, again, that commitment to connecting with community as part of this plan on an ongoing basis. So just because something is evidence-based and working in another area, we need to engage with the community here and make sure that it makes sense and will work here in Phoenix. So it's definitely an iterative process, but we wouldn't recommend anything without looking at what practices are existing and what's working well in other areas.
Thank you. Appreciate you all.
Thank you. Other comments? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Chairwoman. First of all, I just want to say a very warm welcome to you, Nicole. I'm so happy that with you and Tisa and Emma, we actually have such a solid team to lead on this front. So thank you for being here, and it's great to finally be able to work with you. I also want to commend Councilmember Garcia for his work in particular on setting up the Public Health Office. I know, we saw a huge need during the pandemic, and we wouldn't have this amazing team here without his leadership. Seeing the data, I think, is very, it's not surprising in any way, but it's certainly disheartening. District 7 has the highest number of fatal overdoses in Phoenix in 2022, so this work is essential to the health and safety of my residents. So I just have a couple of questions here. You shared the demographic data on overdoses by district. Do they come from a particular age group or zip code as well? Is that data that we have available?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Vice Mayor Ansari, are you asking within the district a breakdown by demographics? It could be either district-wide, citywide. Is there,
especially age is what I'm interested in.
Yeah, I do have a further breakdown. It's, percentages by age group. I will work with the Maricopa County to put that into rates, which is why I didn't share it, because, it's important to look at the population of that age group, and a rate is probably something a little better to use, but it's definitely information that we will be able to share, and will be part of that broader, as I mentioned, surveillance and sort of dashboard is also breaking down by, by age. It helps us inform, where we should focus our strategies. We are getting, several $1 million a year. It sounds like a lot, but when you talk about the opioid crisis, mental health, and substance use, it's not. So coordinating certainly with all of those other investments that are happening and making sure that we can target, data does become a very important part of that. So yeah, we will have age breakdowns and also ethnicity we're looking at as well. I didn't want to share percentages because they don't mean as much as rates. So that'll be something we'll be able to share in the future.
Okay. Definitely looking forward to seeing that. It may be anecdotal, but I think from my residents, I've heard quite a bit about young people in particular. So I'm wondering what sort of outreach will be done targeting young people, whether, you're planning information sessions in schools, or I remember growing up, I did the DARE program for smoking, and honestly, it was very effective. So I'm wondering what kinds of plans we may have in place for outreach amongst youth.
Yep, so through you, Madam Chair, Vice Mayor Ansari. I didn't mention as part of that outreach, so we have talked a lot about youth and schools. That's obviously, youth are a huge component of prevention. you heard me mention the majority of overdoses are between 25 and 65. So really, that group, before 25, we need to get to folks just like tobacco and other substance use disorders. Schools and youth will be a big part of that. So we do plan to include in the assessment, whether it's in collaboration with Maricopa County or on our own, the City of Phoenix, some engagement with schools to understand, again, what are their current practices, what are their needs. We're not aware yet of any dollars that are flown that are being flowed specifically to schools for youth prevention and education. So that is something that we will do as part of this assessment and ensure that they're a focus across those 4 pillars.
Got it. And then we were just talking about success stories from other places around the world. Do we have examples of cities or states that have actually been successful on this front, and are we pulling from their plans?
Success is difficult to define, and it depends on the indicator, that we're addressing. There are lots of success stories. So naloxone, for example, I mentioned that is one of the first key strategies every city starts with. We do have 991 people that lost their lives due to an overdose last year, and many of those lives could have been saved, likely, if they were, not alone, had the proper harm reduction services, and as well, potentially access to naloxone to reverse an overdose. So we do know that strategy significantly does reduce overdose death in other communities. So that may be one example. There are, depending on the indicator we're looking at, there are many evidence-based strategies and success stories, within the United States and then other countries. I came from Canada and had been working on our opioid plan there since 2016, and again, learning from other areas that maybe were unfortunately a little further ahead because they were impacted much earlier in this crisis.
Got it. Thank you. And then finally, in the southwestern part of my district, we're seeing a lot of crossover between Phoenix and the Gila River Reservation. Are we coordinating with reservation leadership on this front?
So thank you, Vice Mayor. Anna, sorry for that question. We are working in collaboration with Maricopa County Department of Public Health. So as I mentioned, they have funds for the entire region. Some are flowing directly to the various large cities, but we will look at all of the various areas, and as well, certainly where Phoenix borders other communities, we're very interested in working closely with them around strategies. So, in short, the answer is, absolutely, and that area has come up multiple times. There are liaisons from the Maricopa County Health Department that are assigned to all of those areas, and so this is just part of that evolving conversation.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for your work. When you're further down the line, and you mentioned community forums being part of the work that you're going to be doing, my office would love to partner with you if, once you get the data of really the breakdown, especially by zip code, if that is possible within the district, we'd love to work with you to work with schools, host forums for parents, whatever that may be that you think will be most effective. So looking forward to that, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I guess the only thing I would add, I know, Nicole, you and I had the chance to meet before today. So once again, welcome. I think it's a department that's very needed in the city. I know we've been talking about it for a little bit, but we're happy that you're here now, you and your whole team. So thank you guys for all of your hard work. I guess the only thing I would add to this, looking at the numbers, I'm not surprised, and I can only imagine the parts of my district that I feel like are being very impacted by these numbers. And I know that one of the things that you and I spoke about was some sort of collaboration with the clinics. Because I think, part of and I don't know if I spoke to you, Lori, or if I spoke to Jeff about it, but one of the things is, once someone decides that they want services, and once someone decides, yes, I want to make a change in my life, how many clinics do we coordinate with so that we can get people into services, right? As you are doing this assessment, I think I would also like to see a plan on how is it that we're creating these relationships with the clinics. How do we coordinate with them? Because I think it is important, for everyone to know, to understand as you're doing this assessment, once someone decides to get services, what are the different steps? And I think that is something that's important for different departments to know, like people that interact with folks that need services every day, our park rangers, our NSD specialists. We have a lot of different people that do interact with people every day. And when they want to go out and if they might go out there and have a conversation, they should be able to tell someone. If you decide that you want services, these are all the different steps. And I think as we're doing this assessment, I would ask that we add that to the assessment, that we create a plan, that we create a campaign, maybe with some neighborhood leaders' input, just because I think that, like we talk about, we have different departments, everyone goes out there and does a lot of hard work, but I think it's good for the public and for different departments to understand this is how we help, this is how we lead with services, and this is what services looks like. And also having those relationships with the different clinics. I know we talked about the Camelback corridor and the plan that my team and I are putting together for that whole area, and we're already talking to neighbors and talking to the businesses in that area. And I would like to see us move into that direction as we're doing this assessment. There's a lot of parts of my district, but I think that's one of the new ones that we're one of the next ones that we're starting with. So I guess I would just ask to add that piece on our relationships with the clinics and maybe with the neighboring cities, what type of partnerships could we do with them? Like I know for me it's Glendale. What is it that we can do to build those partnerships with them as well as we continue to build this plan and we continue to do this assessment, if that makes sense.
So thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try to address your comment. It does make sense. So some of the things that will be part of that staff assessment, you're absolutely right. So we acknowledge that there are staff across many departments that are engaging directly with the community and certainly directly with people who use substances. So part of our internal assessment will be to understand, where are they at in their baseline knowledge and develop some training and resources for them to better engage with those individuals. So part of that would be, you mentioned screening and referral. So that is an evidence-based, to Vice Mayor Anasari's earlier comment, that is an evidence-based strategy, a brief screening and referral system, but that's something that we would need to build with all of those departments to make sure that they're doing so in a way that is consistent, it's evidence-based, and will achieve its intended result. As well, certainly, there's a lot of stigma as it relates to substance use disorder and opioid use disorder, and so that's one piece that we acknowledge that we do need to address at the beginning, is providing some education and really getting at those typical sort of myths and stigma. And you mentioned clinics, so our office has been starting to meet and engage with various clinics across the community. I think our role is certainly to be that bridge with the health community, and so we have spent quite a bit of time meeting, understanding what services are available, and making those connections. And pathways, as you identified, is something that most cities do start to work on as it relates to mental health and substance use disorder. People come into treatment or into services in different ways, and so understanding that pathway and what door is the right door it will be a big part of this process for sure. And I expect that internal advisory committee will be a big part of that as well. But we will definitely make sure that everything you've mentioned is added in, and some of it is, I didn't articulate it, but it is definitely part of, is part of our plan and our strategy forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments, questions? So with that, I would like to make the motion to recommend City Council approval of the private property cleanup program pilot framework as revised with additional flexibility for the current
Madam
fiscal
Chair,
year.
That's the next
the next
item
one?
to be presented.
All right. Sorry about that. So I guess with that, we have no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we'll go to item 11, a private property cleanup program pilot update. We will begin with a presentation from Deputy City Manager Gina Montes and the Neighborhood Services Department.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. In early December, Spencer and NSC presented to the subcommittee a potential framework for the budgeted private property cleanup program pilot. Since that presentation, we have refined the framework based on community input that was requested by the subcommittee, and I'll turn it over to Spencer Self to review that revised framework.
Thank you, Gina. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I know we are the only thing between you and lunch, and so we will try to go quick, and I appreciate that you were already ready to make the motion, so we'll go through this quickly. So today we'll provide a very quick refresher on the original framework of our outreach, and then a summary of our outreach and the final proposed framework. Once again, I'm joined by Yvette Roeder, our Deputy Director over this program, and I will now hand the presentation over to her for a quick summary of the original framework from December 7th.
Thank you, Spencer. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. As you recall, we discussed the four primary considerations when creating the original framework. The first one was the expectation that we would have a significant number of residents interested in the program. Number two, limited funding to meet that demand. Number three, concerns regarding legal issues around implementation. And the fourth one is making sure that we have a meaningful program for our customers and neighborhoods. So based on those considerations, we proposed two categories. The first is the expansion of enhanced cleanups that would expand services for the areas where the city is already providing enhanced cleanups by the Street Transportation Department to address rights-of-way and private property. And the other category is the individual properties cleanup assistance that is broken out into 3 levels of assistance. Those 3 levels of assistance were the roll-off dumpster assistance, the right-of-way cleanup, and advanced private property cleanup. So each level would be a stepping stone and prerequisite to move on to the next, and all services would be offered based on a proven track record of the owner taking meaningful actions to be responsible for their property. I will now hand the presentation back over to Spencer to discuss the outreach we conducted, feedback from the community, and the modifications to the framework for your consideration.
Thank you, Yvette. So since we last presented, we held multiple community meetings, including focused meetings with the Hatcher Urban Business Alliance and Madison Pioneer Coalition, who are around the Human Services campus, regarding the expanded enhanced cleaning categories, and a citywide meeting for broader input on the individual property category. We also provided a survey to help gather feedback for those who could not make the citywide meeting. While there was a wide range of discussion in these meetings, I will summarize some of the key takeaways. For the focus meetings on the enhanced cleanup areas, we received somewhat surprising feedback. While they were appreciative of the city recognizing they had unique issues and seeking to support their neighborhoods, they did not feel that the proposed services would make a significant impact. One described the proposal as starting cleanup efforts in the middle of a hurricane. It would not be frequent enough to really be meaningful for them in the way that we designed it. However, there were a few, particularly in the Madison Pioneer Coalition neighborhood, who did think that there were some specific locations where more frequent biohazard cleanings could be a benefit. Many recommended other uses for the funding to address the underlying issues rather than the Band-Aid approach, which certainly that was something we spoke about back on December 7th. This is not intended to solve the problem. It's more of a remedy, an immediate remedy for what the neighborhoods are experiencing. And then several from both areas mentioned the desire to focus efforts to beautify the neighborhoods, including planting trees to help revitalize the area. Based on this feedback for the enhanced cleanup areas, we're recommending to simplify the services to focus specifically on biohazard cleanups in strategic locations identified in partnerships with the community. For the individual property cleanups, once again, they were appreciative of the city recognizing the need and supporting their neighborhoods. For the surveys, they rated the impact a 4 out of 5, with 5 being very impactful. So they felt that this was a desirable program for their needs. And the vast majority felt the eligibility criteria was reasonable. In fact, I think we may have received one comment out of all of the comments we received that specifically address the eligibility criteria. However, we did receive quite a few questions about specifics, such as how these services would be requested, which of course we talked about through the Phoenix Cares program, and as referrals working with our neighborhood specialists, the Office of Homeless Solutions, the police department, and others. Whether or not tenants could also request these services. Sorry, and now I'm having an issue with my, there we go. Whether or not tenants could also request these services, which will depend on the rights conveyed to them as tenants of the property. If the neighborhood could request these services for a property, which would only be possible if we also got the owner's consent. And when the program would launch, recognizing that where we are in the fiscal year, we will have very limited time for this current year's funding. And if partnership opportunities could be leveraged to address multiple properties in coordination when appropriate. We certainly have a number of nonprofits and community groups who would like to leverage for multiple sites in their neighborhoods so that we're not just doing one at a time, which I think is a great idea. And these questions really helped highlight the level of interest, the need for flexibility to work out some of the kinks in the design, especially in the first year where we have limited time to implement. And for that reason, we are recommending to maintain the 3 levels of assistance for the individual properties, but with additional flexibility for the current fiscal year as we have less time to spend the allocated funds, and we can use this time to test out the procedures and limitations of the program. With that, we are requesting the subcommittee recommend City Council approval of the private property cleanup program as revised, with additional flexibility in the current year, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions, comments? Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Spencer and Yvette and Gina for the presentation. I'm glad to hear that residents approve of the private property cleanup program and the requirements for it. As you well know, this was promised 2 years ago to the residents around the Human Services campus, and I'm glad that we're finally able to deliver on it. The one question I have is whether or not you foresee needing additional staff capacity to actually help deliver timely assistance.
Madam Chair, Vice Mayor, with this program, we were also allocated funds for one additional position, what we were envisioning to be a project management assistant. And so now if the approval moves forward to move forward with this program, then we would look to hire that position. Beyond that, we are working closely with our partners. So the way that we've envisioned this funding, in particular with, let's say, the streets department, if they're able to perform some of the cleanup work, then what we would do is we would pay them. And that would allow them to hire the necessary staff that they would need in order to provide this additional service. Again, we have very limited funding initially, so we're not anticipating whole crews that would be needed at this point. But depending on how the success of the program moves forward, we would present next year some of our initial findings from the pilot, as well as any recommendations for further developing the program in the future.
Okay, I appreciate it. I think for me, my biggest concern always is like us coming out and promising programs and announcing big things, and then it takes quite a while to get it up and running. So I'm grateful that it's moving now and that you were able to meet with the most impacted neighborhood groups around the area, and I hope that the results will be seen by them as well. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? Well, thank you so much for all of your hard work. I know that this is something that we've all been waiting for and excited to be able to make a motion to recommend City Council approval of the private property cleanup program pilot framework as revised with additional flexibility for the current fiscal year.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. With that, we have another opportunity for a call to the public. Do we have any members of the public here to speak?
There are no additional members to speak today.
Thank you. And for future agenda items, do any of my colleagues have any future items that would like to see discussed? No, and I think that was the last item on our agenda, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Y reciclaje a partir del lunes 3 de octubre.
So, si su basura se colecta el lunes o un martes o cualquier día de la semana, ese día va a cambiar.
Las nuevas rutas resultarán en cambios para aproximadamente 80% de los residentes.
Estamos mandando folletos a todos los residentes de Phoenix para decirles cuál va a ser